Well, good evening and welcome to the December 4th, 2017 Village of Webster special meeting. We have scheduled on the agenda this evening a public hearing in order to accommodate the schedule for application and Matt's schedule as well. We called this special meeting tonight to have the public have their opportunity to listen to the presentation and then respond to the board regarding it. So we have a public hearing, a project to reconstruct and rehabilitate a targeted area of East Main Street at the village's eastern gateway. The private investor-led initiative proposes work on up to 7 vacant properties within 1 square block of the village downtown core. That would encompass addresses 22 to 42 East Main Street, 58 East Main Street, and 15 through 21 East Main Street. So at this time, Matt, I will let you take the floor. Sure. And talk regarding the Restore New York Communities Initiative.
Great. All right. Is this on? Can you hear me? Is this on? I'm logged up, so that's okay. Thank you for having me here tonight. I am the Executive Director of the Webster Economic Development Alliance. And one of the key things that the Alliance does as a public-private partnership is we go after grant money where possible to try and facilitate improvements that are priorities driven by the municipalities themselves. I work on behalf of both the town and the village. And within the village, one of the main priorities that has been identified is the revitalization of East Main Street. We have a significant number of vacant properties there currently. The Restore New York Communities Initiative, this is a grant program from Empire State Development. I'm going to give a brief overview of the program itself, and then you should be able to follow along in your little handout. It's going to be on the screen as well. And then we'll talk a little bit about the specific project that we're proposing, and we're trying to pull together in partnership with some private property owners on East Main Street. So just a quick overview, it's a financial assistance program, and largely for residential, commercial, and mixed-use projects, okay? And it's targeted for vacant, abandoned, condemned surplus properties. So the way it works is it's a reimbursement program. So the municipality has to be the actual applicant, and then the municipality would, if awarded the funding, would actually never receive the monies. It would contract with the private property owners themselves, enter into a contract so that those property owners would conduct the project, and then the property owners would then seek reimbursement from the village. The village would then in turn seek reimbursement from the state. Checks would basically get passed through the village in one hand, out the other. So it's not as if there's a lump sum of funds that come into the village with which, they can, arbitrarily put towards given projects. It's very specific. The projects which we are proposing to apply for have already been pre-approved. And that pre-approval application deadline was October 13th, excuse me. So the addresses that we have identified thus far are set in stone. We cannot modify or move the application to separate addresses or separate parcels because those parcels have already been pre-approved by the state. Okay? So now it's a matter of parcels can be subtracted from the application, they just cannot be added. So projects that are architecturally consistent or and consistent with nearby properties, and it should also be consistent with the village's revitalization plan. Now, the village has created its own downtown core strategy. In addition, to its comprehensive plan, the Webster Economic Development Alliance in 2015 also created a community revitalization strategy, which included downtown revitalization as one of its core or 6 pillar initiatives to be conducted throughout the Webster community. So it is very much consistent with everything that the public, both the boards and the residents have identified as priorities within Webster. Ineligible activities are those things that would be for municipal use. So if the municipality had an old highway garage that it wanted to revitalize and continue to use as a highway garage, these funds aren't eligible for that. Okay, this is an economic development program. The whole point is to create jobs and have an economic development enhancement. So that's why municipal buildings typically aren't something that's allowed. So revitalize urban centers, improve local housing stock, increase the tax base. Those are all key buzzwords that we're going to be adding into our application. Project feasibility and readiness is also key. I would say that 1 out of the 3 projects are significantly ready to move forward. 2 are, another one is, viable, and the third one, we are still trying to pull that one together and actively get some participation on that one. So we're doing our best to pull this together within a short period of time. We have about 8 weeks to really pull the application together from the time that it's been approved through the time that we have to submit. There's funding limits. The funding limit for the size of municipality for the village of Webster is $1 million. And as part of that, the village actually needs to commit up to, if the village was to be awarded the funding, they would have to commit up to 1% as a commitment fee. So if the village was awarded $1 million, there have to be a $10,000 commitment fee, and that essentially would be the only real funds in addition to the application fund that would actually have to come out of the public coffers. The rest is all private money. Lots of documents. It's a very complicated process. There's lots of documentation that we need to identify. We need to come up with cost estimates. We need to come up with affidavits of property ownership and make sure that the property owners are aware that we're applying for the funds and they approve of that. That's something that we're still trying to accomplish. We should have at least 2 out of the 3 for sure by the end of by the time we're supposed to hit the submittal button, which is in less than 2 weeks. As well, there needs to be public hearing and public notice. This meeting has been posted in the paper for 3 consecutive days in accordance with the publication requirements of the village. Have to have a public hearing, listen to the public comment, and then at the end, the village would need to approve submitting the application via a formal resolution. And then we'd also have to get approval from the local zoning board that the project is consistent with the village's comprehensive plan, and that's one step that we still need to take, but it does not appear that we would have any concerns with inconsistencies with the plans and the comprehensive plan of the community. Proposal from the developer, there's whole sorts of things. Village is required to submit a $500 check for the application fee, okay, because the municipality is smaller than 40,000. So it's a $500 non-refundable application fee. If awarded the funding, a 1% commitment fee. So those are the monies. So if the village had to commit $10,000 to get $1 million in investment in the community, it's actually a pretty big win-win. Yeah. 1% on the dollar for the municipality. Scoring criteria. Economic distress is one of the highest scoring factors, as well as whether or not there's actually other state and local funding or federal funding that's been awarded to the project. The study area that we are proposing actually is a lower, it's more economically distressed than maybe surrounding areas within the village. The village itself, as far as Empire State is concerned, is slightly distressed based on the amount of its population that lives within or underneath the poverty level, based on the unemployment rate within the community, as well as based on average household incomes and how you compare income versus expenses versus just general expenses for housing within the community. So they have a bunch of metrics, and we, unfortunately or fortunately, we will be qualified for some of that money, and no one likes to say that your community is distressed unless you're going after public funding, and then everybody raises their hand and says, we're doing terrible, we really need your help. That's just the way it is. We need to also work with the State Historic Preservation Office. It's part of the review process. It does not need to be completed before we hit the submit button, but until or before any contract is signed with the state, that process will need to be completed, as well as the SEQR, the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So there's going to be additional opportunities for public input and discussion regarding this application. The resolution to submit is not and this meeting is not the last step for the public to have a say and be involved in the process. There's multiple opportunities, but our goal is to put together the best application we can and that's within the next 10 days. So we've already gone through that first important date step, received by 5 p.m. on October 13th. Our intent to apply has been submitted. We've been given approval. That was received on October 24th. So then the next step was by December 15th to basically be able to pull all those applications together, get all the information, as much information as we can from the property owners, and then move forward.
It's really aggressive.
So I ran through it really quickly, but I think you can get the gist of the Restore New York program. It's a reimbursement program. Money does not come in directly to the community, but the community is the pass-through entity. So the Village of Webster project area that we're proposing has 3 sites to it. The first site is the North 43 LLC project, which we have 3 to 4 separate addresses as part of that project. Those buildings remain in essentially a vacant shell condition. There's no activities going on in those structures. They are vacant. They have very little infrastructure left. Actually, they're essentially all infrastructure right now. There's very little left in them. And right now, one of the largest impediments is the market rate. In the end, in order to make these viable, we need market rents somewhere between $17 and $20 per square foot to make the pro forma work in the public and on a private investment perspective. And typical rates right now in the Village of Webster are going between $12 and $15 a square foot. So we have a delta of money that needs to be made up somewhere. Okay, so there's that gap of between 2 and 3 and up to maybe up to $5 per square foot that the market's not willing to support it because it's just not there yet. Yet in order to actually rebuild these structures and get people in them, the rents need to come out in that between $16 and $20 a square foot. So that delta is why we really need public assistance in that particular project area. The second site is the Harmony House, owned by the Chorus of the Genesee. We're working with them currently on devising a project that would include renovations to the exterior, painting, trim work, ADA accessibility, accessible restrooms within the facility itself, and then, if possible, an upgraded heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, most definitely the air conditioning system, with the goal to make it a very comfortable building such that they can generate more revenue through events and basically be able to self-sustain the building. Because without more events going through that building, the entity won't be able to self-sustain it. All the funds that they bring in right now literally go right out the door and just maintaining that building. And should they fall off and lack, the ability to hold events on a regular basis, well, then we're just going to see continued disinvestment in the structure, not because they want to, but just because they can't afford to maintain the building. Okay, so that's the second project. And the third one that we're still trying to identify is, and that we would like to see a cooperation, is 15 to 21 East Main Street. That's the building there on the corner that wraps Latham Park. That's largely a vacant structure now, and we think it's a great opportunity to be involved in this program, and I think it fits the bill. So just a quick rundown. Anticipated costs for the site number 1, which is the North 43. For the properties that we have identified, which don't include where the Prime Restaurant is, that building's in fabulous condition. There's no need for public dollars on that building, as well as where the salon currently is. There's zero need for public monies in that building because it was just renovated. The rest of the structures are currently vacant and could benefit from the assistance to renovate or revitalize them. So we're looking at a total project cost for those addresses, which are 24 East Main, 32 East Main, 36 to 38 East Main, and 40 East Main. Total renovation cost of about $650,000, and a total request of about $582,000. So the anticipated owner's share is $64,000, but if
if I was to show you the pro forma for the whole development, which includes this Main Street and the building behind it, right now the investment in the project is $1.1 million, and that's all private money. So this would be an offset to that $1.1 million of private money. It would help facilitate and speed, right? I think we would all agree, we'd like to see more things happening faster on East Main Street. And I think the inclusion of this in the program and it being awarded some public funds, I think would allow that revitalization to happen much quicker. Harmony House, the projected cost right now, based on preliminary estimates, is approximately $280,000. The great thing about the program is that it actually includes soft costs that could be reimbursable. So, engineering, architecture, if they needed, a structural engineer to come in, anybody to do some design elements, even some legal elements that would be, and closing costs to obtain financing. All of those elements can be subject to the 90%, 10% share. I think maybe that's one thing that I failed to recognize. It's a 90% grant. So in other words, 90 cents on the dollar. So you can apply for up to 90 cents for every dollar spent. Property owner would get reimbursed for those 90 cents and would have to then maintain the funding on the remaining 10% of the project. Which is why you see the sums that we're coming up with here are roughly 90%. So anticipated restore request for the Harmony House of about $250,000, with the Harmony House coming up with just shy of 30 grand, which, based on our discussions with the members of the Grange and the course of the Genesee, that's not a number that's unattainable. We think we have a good shot at being able to fund that. And then the project debt, 15 to 21, if it was to be able to come to fruition, we're looking at about $160,000 request for funding, and that rounds out our $1 million maximum. Essentially, we're allowed to ask for $1 million total. We're looking at about $580,000 for the 43 North project, and $252,000, $252,000 from the Harmony House, and rounding it out, bringing it up to about $994,000 total request would be that project at 15 to 21 East Main. So that's largely the bulk of my presentation tonight. I wanted to give you a quick and dirty about where we stand and what we're hoping to apply for. And at this point, I'm here to answer any questions that the board may have or the public may have.
Is there anything that we can do to help? I mean, it sounds like you still need some information from the various owners.
Yeah, the folks with the Harmony House,
Yeah.
I think they're trying. I think they're interested. It's just making sure that people understand that deadlines are deadlines. We can't push things back, and sometimes maybe there needs to be. Maybe we can have a special meeting, just like we're having tonight, to try and facilitate the program. I have reached out to the owner of 15 to 21, and I haven't received a response about their interest. As of right now, we don't have indication that they're interested.
They so desperately needed the facilities.
Would that have an effect on the overall
I don't think so.
application?
I don't think so. If that one was left out,
Yes.
no. Nope. No, actually, it's very strong. So what you hope for is you want to provide an application that basically meets all their criteria, and a lot of the things that they want to see are that there's interest and people are really willing to commit to it.
Yeah.
And the North 43 is, obviously, they're very committed to it. He's provided everything, Charlie has provided everything that we've asked for. Letters of commitment from the bank to fund the project, all of his cost estimates, all of his performance. He's ready to go. He makes a strong application.
Yeah.
And so we're confident about the strength of that component, but in the end, we still need to score better than the other communities within the region.
Ned, on behalf of the owners, I'm wondering about the reimbursement process. Because we all know how that operates. mess. And once they submit their bill to the village, and we submit to the state, I wonder what the turnaround is for that.
What we've been told is 45 days or less,
Really? Really?
as long as you have all of your paperwork
In order.
in order. And there's obviously, there's going to be a lot of assistance provided to the municipalities by Empire State Development. They're gonna assign a project manager to you, and that project manager will be based out of 400 Harrow East Building downtown on Andrew Street. So they will be local, so you will have access to them, and they will be a local individual that you can talk to. You can either go and see them in person, or talk to them on the phone, and they're right here. So they do try and make it convenient for you. It's just competitive just to get the funding.
Great.
So they
That would be amazing, 45 days.
They are actually getting on, the state is getting better. It's just, getting through the red tape to just
Yeah.
submit it is one thing, but typically, as long as you have all your ducks in a row, they don't want the paperwork hassle either. As long as you meet all the criteria, you've already been pre-approved, there's already a purchase order in place, they're just gonna move it through.
Thank you.
Bill Stata from 121 Fuller Avenue. My background is coming from the banking industry, working consulting and real estate projects similar to this. My question of the project, particularly on the 22 to 42 Main Street, given the gap that exists between the market rents and the rents that need to be in place in order to make it a viable venture, what's the thought process and how these funds are going to help the process of getting those storefronts
Right.
occupied?
So the way real estate works is, obviously, those buildings are essentially in a shell condition, so they need, $40 to $50 or more per square foot, just invested into them, right? We're talking, $150,000 plus for each building. And an investor needs to then, we'll spend that money, but then if someone's gonna sign a lease, they take that $150,000 investment and they amortize that over the term of the lease. So if it's a 10-year lease, that's, they amortize that at $15,000 per year for a 3,000 square foot building. And they do the math, right? They figure out, okay, I'm gonna make this investment, somebody committed to leasing it for this long, so essentially I'm gonna get paid back that money over time. Plus, I still gotta pay my taxes. I still gotta pay for the loan that I bought the property with, right? So I already gotta pay my own debt service, plus the debt service on top of it that I needed to renovate the building, plus taxes, plus operating expenses, right? So all of that, all those little components all add up. And the goal is, if the construction component, right, can be offset, now we're talking about, okay, so now the original debt service, the original taxes, the operating expenses, those are things that can start to be carried with the $12 per square foot, or the $15 a square foot that the market will cover. But it's that additional $5 to $7 per square foot that is required just to get the building up to snuff, is where that delta is. So if we can offset that money, or at least participate in that, that's where the benefit is.
Okay, thanks, man.
Matt? Hi,
Hi.
Jody Lauer, 88 Dunning. I just have a question about timeline. How about, will they have a set timeline for how long the project will take them to do? Seems like right now, everything in the village is taking forever to get finished, and is there gonna be a timeline?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. So the announcement for funding award would be in February, we're hoping. And then the state's mandating that within 24 months, the monies are spent. So 24 months from February is when they would basically be mandated that they would be spent, or, the project would be well underway, and the private monies would be spent, but they want to get the reimbursement money out the door within 24 months. So that's the whole point, is that it's not, that it doesn't drag on. They want action and momentum, and they want the money to all hit kind of, which is why they really want to see targeted projects. So rather than saying, okay, we're going to pick, a vacant building over here, and, we may have one you know, we probably could have picked another one over on West Main Street, or maybe one on North Avenue, right? We could have hopped all over the village, but part of the application is I want to see an intense amount of activity in a very small area. So our goal was, let's find 3 properties that are essentially right across the street from one another and leverage as much of that public funding as we can, rather than having it be in disparate locations where we just don't get the bang for your buck.
So reimbursement occurs upon completion of the project.
That is correct. Right, so the owners do need to be able to finance it. And what's unclear to me is whether or not the owner would have to provide, whether or not the contractor, right, whoever's conducting the project, would have to provide a lien release.
Yeah.
You know, basically saying we've been paid, we don't have a lien, and then you can pay that. You know, there's some minutia involved there. I don't know if they'll pay on an invoice, or if they'll have to receive, you know, notice that the contractor has actually been paid. That is, you know, that's an important discrepancy that, you know, we'll just have a need to understand if we're awarded the funds.
Yeah.
But it's a good point. Right? But once you're awarded the funding, once the municipality is awarded the funding, as long as the private entity fulfills their contract with the village, they're, you know, by conducting the project as they're supposed to, they're gonna get their money.
Is there anything that we can do to help with Luigi's building?
I mean, aside from having,
Contact him or
you know,
somebody?
having more successful communication.
Yeah. Is there anything we can do to help?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's too late, but there'd have to be a lot going on in a really short period of time in order to make sure that we
Really
get
in
that
bad
built.
shape.
So,
Living so close to it, I
Aren't there
really
people
don't
living
have it.
upstairs there?
Oh,
I thought
he's
it-
got some, yeah, he's got some Section 8 people
Oh,
renting. I think there's only 3 of them being rented at the moment.
that's what I
So
thought.
you've had good conversation with Harmony House?
to date, yeah, I believe they're very interested.
We're trying very hard to make sure we're on time with it. So Matt's been,
Great opportunity.
I've been working with Matt and it's just trying to get everybody on the same time schedule.
Yep.
But I like the idea of a joint meeting. I'm gonna explore that starting tomorrow and see if we can get that
I
moving.
think a joint meeting would be something that would be worthwhile to explore,
I
yes.
think that would really work for them.
We have the challenge is we have 2 boards involved, both of them doing different things, and both of them with slightly different objectives, and so we have to make sure all those schedules.
Well, of course, with all the singing, I mean, this is the holidays, so yeah,
But the answer is it's well worth it.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So we're trying. It's very rare, it's very rare that we really have an opportunity like this.
Mhm.
The funding, the last time the funding was made available was 2 years ago, and it wasn't structured this way. They structured it differently. It was definitely more geared towards industrial properties, industrial vacancies, and less towards urban cores. Like 10 years ago, when this initially first came out, it was geared towards urban cores, and then they kind of went away from that, now they've come back to it. But this funding is not available every year. It's not a cyclical thing. It's whenever the state decides to fund it. So they could fund it this year, likely won't fund it again next year, maybe every 2 years, 2 to 3 or 4 years in between. So now's the time for us to really, make it go
It's a
in.
great opportunity on the east end
Yeah.
to really have something happen.
Well, and I think, especially with
We've had-
Charlie's project and
Yeah.
having him be as prepared as he is, the timing couldn't be any better for that particular parcel, because the investor is ready to go and is committed. And it's one of the things that we've always struggled with in the village, is we've had ownership problems. We don't have property problems, we have ownership problems.
Yep.
So we have,
I guess that's why I was asking about Luigi, if there's anything that we can do as a board, if there's anything. I mean, I don't know how to contact him. I'm sure we've got a tax account number.
well, I called the number on the building, a couple times. I just haven't received feedback.
He hasn't been there very much lately,
A
that's
formal request.
part of the other problem, exactly.
Is there,
Go ahead.
Carol, is there an opportunity in the application process to, with this property at 15 and 21, without the response from the current owner, is there able to simply put that in the application or something that you'd ask to be deferred to a later time?
No, unfortunately, the application requires an affidavit of site control from all of the properties. So in other words, we need an affidavit of site control signed by the property owner. We need a commitment letter to fund the project by either the property owner or its assignee. Maybe it has sold the property, right, and it's under contract, so it's gonna assign the project to another developer. And then we need essentially the source of funds, a relatively strong committed source of funds. So the property owner is key. The village cannot apply for the project without the program specifically prevents that from happening. The property owner has to be involved.
I mean, it just strikes me that that building, that's the biggest gap that exists in terms of the need of the owner to provide funding, $245,000.
At least, yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, the question is, who's gonna pick that up? If it's not the current owner, let's find a new owner. Because that's probably one of the most strategic corners on the east side.
Does anything change if the property is condemned?
I mean, at that point, if the property is condemned, well, I mean, condemnation is one thing. I mean, a change of title is what changes things, and that's not gonna happen. It won't happen soon.
It can't happen.
In the end, it's all a title issue. We're applying for funding for the town of Webster as well.
Yeah.
We're having a similar issue with a condemned property and that's been foreclosed on, that has title issues, who actually has ownership of it. So we're going through that process right now and trying to get all the lawyers to agree and paperwork to be signed and, you know, everybody to all play nice in the sandbox, and it actually makes it a lot more messy. I'd rather just have a property owner say, you know, thank you very much for 90 cents on the dollar.
And when was the first time that you attempted to contact Luigi? Was it months ago?
Well, no, it wasn't months ago. Because what happened was, it was brought to my attention that the property was being negotiated for sale. Okay? So I stayed out of that. Because I didn't want to interfere in a private negotiation between two entities, so I stayed out of it. But I believe those talks broke down,
What I understand.
so. Because I'm not, my role is not to interfere in those activities. It's private property owners and private investors, and they do their thing. I don't try and play one against the other. It's just not what we do.
Any other comments? Concerns, questions?
Well, are we competing for this money?
Oh, yeah, heavily.
Yeah.
I would
You
say,
know,
I would say
I heard you mention that when we first
we have
started.
a less than 50% chance, and I
Yeah.
say drastically less than 50, and I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna grease the wheels as best I can. This is a very competitive funding source, because it's a lot of money. I mean, $1 million, that's
Mhm.
for a village this size. It's very important.
Matt, what's the pot of money the state has set aside for this total?
50 million
50 million.
across the state.
Yeah.
And they've identified 2 million for larger municipalities and up to 5 million for special projects. They'll probably award, you know, they'll probably award 2 or 3 special projects that get $5 million. You know, the way the state works is they came up with their, you know, have you heard about these, you know, villages and small cities getting $10 million each, like Geneva
Oh, yeah.
and Batavia? Well, obviously, there's other small cities that applied but didn't get awarded funding. So those communities that, you know, that came up just short, they're probably gonna be awarded their, you know, not 10 million, but 5 million. You know, it's just
Exactly.
it's just the way it is. But if you don't apply, you never get awarded
You're
funding.
never going to.
So,
Exactly.
So our hope is that, you know, we've applied often enough and been turned on often enough, and I've had many discussions
Just
that I
keep doing
think
it.
we're due for a win. So we're giving it our shot.
So thank you for your efforts.
It's, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Your statement that it's up to $1 million, if we only have 2 commitments, so that it is not up to that, does that have any significance? It does not. It's on the merit of the application.
Yeah, I mean, if you, they've awarded communities with projects of $50,000. So if you don't ask for $1 million, that's fine. If you only ask for $50,000 and it's a really good project,
They'll do it.
you know, they'll do it. But if you're asking for $1 million and the projects aren't ready to go, they're like, nah, you're not really ready, it's not worth it. But if you're ready to go, and you're asking for, you know, $580,000 to, you know, $800,000,
So, yeah, nothing else, if we could get.
and they might decide to give you less than your application, right? You say, okay, we're asking for $900,000. Okay, we're only gonna give you 6. And then it's up to you to then figure out, how do you negotiate, how do you come back, how do you go back and negotiate who's getting cut down to what? And that's fine, that's a problem, I would love to have.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I would love to have Harmony House go through some kind of renovation. That entertainment focus area that you have, you know, conceptualized and thought about. I think of Bristol Valley Playhouse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here's this, what is it, an old church or whatever, and I mean, it's a destination. People go there for plays during the summer and all.
I think between a lot of the,
Awesome.
all the food venues that are really starting to take place, the food and dining and you know, and drinks and bars that are taking place, couple that with a performing arts space that's gonna get, you know, entertainment on a regular basis, then now you have the makings of that district that we're hoping to create.
Yeah, I think a good example of the application of any revitalization of the Harmony House is with the volume of people that were here over the weekend for the Christmas parade.
Yeah.
You know, a venue like that to provide a great platform for a music festival, you would have been able to keep people in the village longer. Which is what
Yeah,
everybody
between
wants.
that and Jazz Fest, I mean, you name it, all the events that the BID puts on, this would basically just be another resource for them to be more successful with what they do, and that's the goal.
Yeah, and the revitalizing with the bathrooms and the air conditioning, I mean, that was 2 of the main things they need desperately. So that would be.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Wonderful job, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
If there are no other comments, and I will close the public portion of the meeting. Tomorrow, we have a village board workshop on the agenda for that. We will consider resolution to fund the application to Restore New York application. And
I encourage you to have council craft that
Yes.
resolution.
yes,
Make sure that,
talk with Don.
that all of the, there's some requirements
Does
within.
he have an outline of what's needed for that?
He should have the requirements of the guidelines within, for the grant itself. So if he doesn't, I know I mailed it to everybody, but if I need to mail it back, I can do that.
Right, sure. Make sure I am in contact with him. Tomorrow then, we do have our village board workshop, regularly scheduled workshop. One of the things that we will be doing tomorrow, in fact, we'll be doing it first, is we have a combined meeting with the town board here as well. We are going to be discussing the water treatment plant studies that have been done separately by the village and the town. The town has asked for a joint meeting, a joint discussion on possible feasibility of combining the two treatment plants together. We are going to listen. I believe that both engineers will be here for the town as well as for the village, and we'll be making a presentation, probably less on our part, more on the town's part, in terms of how we would be brought into the process. Neither one has made a real study of the cost involved, so we will be considering that as we meet together. Part of, I think, ours has been available for the community to look at, and one of the costs that was put in there was a $10 million cost to go with to the town to send our septic and sewage to the town.
Where's music coming from?
But, pardon?
You don't hear the music?
I don't know.
What are they carrying about for?
Is it on the laptop? It's actually a good
It's a
song.
background.
Shouldn't be any music playing on that.
But that.
Sound like Richard Marx.
That had
I
to
don't
do with
listen to that.
renovating our, what the village put in place in 1979 down there, which hasn't really been used. It'd be interesting to see what is proposed and listen. So tomorrow night, we will be here, we'll be listening to what town has to say.
And Al's coming.
Al's coming,
Says
and
he's
that
coming.
is something just come see Al. And if he's not here, you may be here in spirit. Stick. Stick. Who's the ventriloquist? Puppets,
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And then our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be on the 14th of December. So we look forward to seeing you all. Thank you for coming. And at 7:45, I have a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.